Welcome to The Thriving Mama, the podcast that teaches you not just how to survive, but to thrive in motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davis. The World Health Organization estimates that 70% of adults in the U.S. experience at least one trauma in their lifetime. And we're talking about those big T traumas, like a death, a divorce, being abused in some way, shape, or form. Those types of traumas, major kind of life-altering, core-rocking events. And while that might very well be true, if we're talking about the little T traumas, that statistic is not true because 100% of us have these. And in episode 5, I dove into the difference between those big T traumas and those little T traumas and why trauma might be sabotaging your ability to be the person that you really want to be. So just as a quick recap, we talked about a second ago what those big T traumas are. Those little T traumas are little things like, being made fun of by your siblings, or like, say you went to your mom and dad and asked, say you needed something, say you needed help going to the bathroom, or you just wanted to have a book read to you, or you just wanted a hug and they were like, not now, I'm too busy. That was imprinted on your nervous system as a trauma. So you could see where all of these little T traumas build up over time, getting excluded from a friend group on the playground when you're 5, or getting laughed at on the playground when you were a little kid, or a teenager. A lot of these happen as a teenager, but we know that in the trauma realm, from ages 0 to 5 are that really critical period. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But there are several features of trauma that, in my opinion, make it more important to address than stress. And we're going to discuss that in this episode. The main points we're going to be touching on are the connection between the mind, the nervous system, and the immune systems, how trauma sets the stage for how you respond to life and stress, and 4 ways you can start addressing your mindset and trauma to have a healthier stress response. If you're confused about where to start addressing your own health, I'm offering podcast listeners a free health check where I'll evaluate your physical, mental, and emotional health and provide you useful resources to help you on your journey. You'll find that link in the show notes. So to get back to why trauma is more important than stress, and like I said, that's my opinion, but the more functional medicine and integrative medicine and trauma clinicians and therapists that I talk to, we all agree, because trauma is that underlying thread that kind of weaves between all of our life events. And we're going to get into the nuances of that. And just to give you guys like a big kind of overarching umbrella, like look at this. We're going to talk about this today. In future episodes very close to, this one, we're also going to be talking more deeply about ACEs, which are adverse childhood events. We're going to be talking more about each one of like specific areas of these topics, more in depth, how those ACEs and how trauma underlie chronic conditions and autoimmunity, and kind of the traumatic tie into all of those. So we're going to be talking about all of this stuff over time and more to come. But today we're really going to be focusing on, the trauma in and of itself and how that changes your body chemistry and essentially how you respond to things for the rest of your life once that trauma has taken place. So like I said, first thing we're going to talk about today is what we term, on the doctor side of things, psychoneuroimmunology. It's a mouthful, but this is where everything comes together. And literally when we say psychoneuroimmuno, we are talking about the mind, the brain, and the nervous system and the immune system, because they are all tied together, because all suppressed emotions suppress the hormones, the nervous system, and the immune system. So that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, and everything is tied together. And over time, it results in signs and symptoms as your body is trying to get you to pay attention. Lots of times when I'm working with people, they will come to me and say, oh yeah, I noticed such and such a couple years ago, name whatever symptom under the sun. And I ignored it. And then over time, it kind of became worse and built up. And then there were more symptoms. And usually it isn't until it dramatically impacts our ability to show up in life, in a very healthy and, I'd say mentally strong way, or it takes away something we love, like a sport or an activity that we love. Those are usually the two reasons people act on, these, the little things that have been building up over time. And this is, the signs and symptoms are just your body trying to get you to pay attention. So we're going to first dive into right now kind of the mind, how it works, and, how it, the veil that it creates. So we create our reality. Our reality is literally created in our minds. Our brain receives 2.3 million bits of information per second, and we need to filter that somehow. Your conscious mind is essentially like the CEO. We tend to hear it the loudest, yet it is the least informed. We call it, behind the scenes, when we're talking clinician to clinician, or sometimes even with our clients, we always say it's the lying mind. It's, the conscious mind is the lying mind. And unfortunately, it is the one we hear the loudest. We are only aware of 0.6% of what actually comes in to this region, which makes sense. If your brain is receiving 2.3 million bits of information per second, and you need to filter out what's important and what's not, largely, kind of from a evolutionary standpoint, to keep you alive. If you're going to be scanning the environment and assessing everything, if you are, living in a cave or living, in a savanna or the trees, and you're like waiting for a predator to pounce, your body's going to be looking for that. In our modern life, it shows up differently, but that's essentially where and how that kind of network established in our brains and how we are the way we are. But your subconscious absorbs that other 99.4%. That's pretty huge. So even though you are not conscious of it, your brain, your subconscious is still absorbing that information. And much of that 99.4% of information is distorted or generalized to fit our perception of reality, because the subconscious is terrified of what's not familiar. It's very, like I said, its whole purpose is to kind of keep you alive, get you to survive, get you to procreate, all of those things. Those are the things that are driving your, body's ability and willingness to survive. So that's, our minds tend to take in this information, and it does create a veil. Like I said before, it fits into our perception of reality. If two people experience the same exact event, like a car accident, one person can get out of the car and walk away and, not think anything of it. Somebody else might be incredibly traumatized. And that has a lot to do with, what were their, childhood traumas? What have they experienced in life? How were they raised? So many things go into that. But that veil, that perception of reality is different from person to person. And this is something we really need to remember, especially, I know those of you who have been listening for a long time you hear me talk about judging other people. I am not a fan, because we have no idea what somebody else has experienced. And this is kind of I'd say the science of why, because you don't know what that person's experiencing. You don't know how their perception of reality has been affected. So that's something to kind of keep in the back of your mind when you're just talking to other people or showing up in life. The next important point is from ages 0 to 5. You've heard me talk about this before in that episode 5 that I mentioned earlier on. We talk a lot about how the ages of 0 to 5 set the stage. All of that is when our values, beliefs, and identity are formed. That forms the basis of our reality and how we show up in the world. And so this is the key to why I believe that trauma is more important than stress when we are addressing root causes and working with patients and clients, because literally trauma sets the stage for how you respond to stress throughout your life. I'm going to say that again one more time. Trauma sets the stage for how you respond to stress throughout your life. So the trauma precedes the stress, which is why it's more important than the stress itself. So there's that piece of the puzzle. When I'm talking to people, so many people are like, clinicians are like, stress. And yes, stress is important because we have all of the types of stresses, which, like I said, we're going to be talking about that a little more specifically in other episodes. But stress shows up in multiple ways. You've kind of got that mental, emotional stress, the stress of daily life, of, all of the challenges that we have to meet every day. And then you've got the physiological stress. So that's like all of the, things that contribute to, conditions like chronic illnesses and autoimmunity, like infections and imbalanced guts and blood sugar dysregulation, and the environmental factors and, physical factors like overdoing exercise, and then the chronic stress, not addressing chronic stress. But if my whole purpose is to say that the trauma, if you're not addressing the trauma and you're working on all of these other things, it's kind of, putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. You're not really addressing what the foundation of all of those root causes are. And don't get me wrong, all of that stuff is important to address. But, in my thoughts, in my opinion, I think that addressing the trauma is the most important piece of the puzzle when we're doing this. And I've said before, it might not be the very, very first thing we address because, some people just need to feel a little bit better before they have the physical and emotional bandwidth to jump into working on trauma. But some people are ready to address it, head on from the get-go. So like, we are all different, and it's important to identify where a person's at and meet them where they're at when you are working in this realm. So like I said before, 0 to 5 sets the stage. That's where, values, beliefs, and identity are formed. And our nervous system uses this information to determine how to respond. So all of those 2.3 million bits of information coming in per second, your nervous system is compartmentalizing this and using that information and learning how to respond, in that moment, but also using it for moments in the future too. It builds on our experiences essentially, and our preconceived notions. So it's like everything that we have and our view on the world tends to get built upon. I'm going to talk about the law of compounding a little bit later, but that's exactly what it's doing. It's confirmation bias, essentially. It's looking to confirm what we currently believe to be true and accurate. And that's why things like confirmation bias are important to kind of check with yourself, because if you're constantly looking at information that only confirms what you believe, you're excluding a whole other swath of information that, would be really important for your brain to, have to make informed decisions. And essentially, all of your experiences are recorded and stored as a holographic or vibrational recording in your body. That's like when you feel something, when people say, I felt it in my gut, or I feel it here. That's what that is. An example that I like to use is from the movie Ghostbusters, where they capture the ghost and put it in the machine, and it's too full and it overloads and it explodes because, there was just too much. There were too many ghosts in there. That's where the law of compounding comes in. All of this building adds to our perceptions and our beliefs, and it just compounds on itself. Another example that I like to use to explain it to patients is being like goal oriented or overachieving or perfectionism, being a trauma response to receiving the message that you are not good enough, or maybe your parents would have been like better off without you. So, as a high achiever, sometimes people don't consider this, but it really is, it's one of those things that we tend to, if you are goal oriented and a perfectionist, you tend to compartmentalize all of this within yourself and not look at, some of the, inner workings and the things within that might be driving why you are that way. So how do we change this? The first thing that I talk to clients and patients about changing this is being aware. So doing a little scan of your body, just having awareness of aches and pains and things that bother you, whether it's actually like a physical ache or pain, or like I said, when somebody says, I felt it in my gut, or when you might have a trauma, or like, for example, like a car accident, if your, hand was on the steering wheel and the steering wheel was like compressed and it sent a shock up your arm, you might end up feeling something in your arm that might then be stored there. And it might ping every once in a while, and you might not be cognizant of the fact that it was related to that car accident. You might just be perceiving it as, I'm, on my computer all the time and that's why it hurts, when in fact, it could have been a different underlying cause for it. It might have been that trauma. The second piece is actively changing your mindset. So we often get into the trap of thinking the same way all the time, but sometimes it's those little shifts in mindset that allow us to perceive something differently and get on with our day. So, if you're sitting in traffic and you're frustrated, you might just be like, cursing the traffic and just going crazy in your car, when in fact that might be just an opportunity to sit there and maybe do some breathing or checking in with your body. It's the ability to have that mental flexibility and change your mindset and stop thinking of all obstacles as obstacles, but maybe opportunities that really can help pave the way to set the stage for change in your brain. Another piece of like how to, in the moment, get yourself out of that kind of catastrophic thinking or frustration is posture. So just standing up straight and putting your hands on your hips, that can increase your oxytocin levels, which is the hormone of love and connection. And we've talked about that a lot before. And it also increases your neuroplasticity, which is going to make you more receptive and, receptive to positivity, and also the just receptive of new information. So that is really important as well. Victory posture is one that I teach people early on because it really can help people. And it literally is like, putting your hands on your hips and standing up really tall. Some people like to put their arms in the air like this. There's lots of ways you can do it. There's no right way. Another way that you can, start changing this is take a moment every day. Think about what you're grateful for and spend about 3 minutes there just doing some calm breathing, and spend the last minute visualizing a goal you want to achieve, either that day, that week, that month, within that year. And that again starts changing. And because you have, put your hands on your hips and started that increase of oxytocin, it actually makes more deep and meaningful and physical changes to your brain. And the last, recommendation I would have would be to actually address the traumas. And for everybody, like I've said before, it looks differently. That can be something, if it's talk therapy, you could start there. Things like EMDR, starting with a journal, just starting some writing, talking to a friend. There's lots of ways to enter this space. But I would recommend you finding a process that works well for you and is thorough and makes you feel like you actually have a sense of calm and peace, and you're progressing after each session. Because what I've found in several trauma modalities is that lots of times people don't end up leaving with a sense of like peace or calmness, and they also aren't necessarily progressing forward in a fashion that is just hopeful. If you've been in, talk therapy for 10 years and it's, you're still kind of in the same spot, it might be time to change what you're doing. And so I wanted to leave you with those 4 main points, and just to remind you that getting to the root of the trauma is really going to help set the stage for you to be able to show up better in life and have a better stress response and have more resilience. Like I said, in future episodes, we're going to be talking about the ACEs, or the adverse childhood events, and we're going to talk about the hormonal connection to the stress response and how the trauma underlies that. If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness, and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.